Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Episode 201, recorded April 6, 2019. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of the Total Screen. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at the Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today we are going to be talking about The Magicians. We're going to be covering 2 episodes. We took a break from The Magicians last week in order to do our 200th episode and do Advocates of Great Television. So now we're catching up on the episode we missed last week, as well as this week's episode. So we're going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 10, All That Hard Glossy Armor, and Season 4, Episode 11, The 411, which is actually kind of funny if you think about it, because it's Season 4, Episode 11.
Oh, of course.
So we're going to talk about those 2 episodes, but before that, we're going to talk about a little bit of casting news that came out. Cowboy Bebop was picked up a while ago, maybe half a year ago by Netflix, where they announced that they were going to be doing a live-action series based on it.
It was even like way before Netflix got involved. There was talks like that they were wanting to do a live-action Cowboy Bebop, and then at some point Netflix came along and picked it up, and I think that's when it really went into production.
Well, there was a movie in development for like a really long time, and like pre-development with like Keanu Reeves attached.
Yeah, they've been trying to get a movie off the ground for forever.
Yeah, but Keanu Reeves, he just turned 97, and he doesn't feel up for playing Spike Spiegel. So they ended up doing a TV series on Netflix, and they just recently cast some of the large roles in it. So right off the bat, John Cho from Harold and Kumar, that series of movies, will be playing Spike.
Let's not downplay John Cho. I know, like, he did the Harold and Kumar movies, but he did Searching, and he was excellent in that. So he can legit act. He's not just like, this goofy, yeah.
Harold and Kumar were great movies. What are you talking about?
They were. Well, the first.
I say that as a great compliment, not as anything disparaging.
Well, the first one was a great movie. I thought I didn't really care much for the sequels, but I did enjoy the first one.
Well, he's been in some other things too. So yeah, John Cho recently did Searching, which was a kind of a interesting concept movie. He'll be playing Spike. Mustafa Shakar from Luke Cage. He was in season 2. He's the guy that
Bushmaster.
Yes, he played Bushmaster in season 2.
He was great in that, but that's literally the only thing I saw him in. So I don't know like how he is as an actor, like outside of that one role. But he was great as Bushmaster. I mean, well, I loved season 2 of Luke Cage all around, and he was definitely a big part of why that season was so good.
He'll be playing Jet, who is Spike's kind of partner in the series, a former police officer turned bounty hunter. Daniela Pineda from The Detour. She played the sister of the main female protagonist in The Detour.
I did not watch that.
She'll be playing Faye Valentine.
Oh yeah, but I never even heard of this actress, but I mean she looks the part at least. So I mean that's good.
Her character is kind of a hot mess in The Detour, and Faye Valentine's a bit of a hot mess herself, so I guess it kind of works out. And then Alex Hassel, who is going to be appearing in Amazon series The Boys, playing the role of Translucent, is going to be appearing as Vicious in Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I see it, to be honest, but based on the press photos. But we'll have to see. John Cho is also an interesting choice for Spike, but I can kind of see it. I wonder if they're going to give him the Spike Fro.
What's interesting is that, in the Spike and Jet dynamic, Spike is more the kind of wild card and Jet's kind of more the straight man.
Right.
And John Cho is typically more of a straight man actor,
He is, yeah. He's more of the straight man.
Like in Harold and Kumar, he's the straight man too. Cal Penn's kind of wild card,
Right, exactly.
And in other things he's been, he oftentimes plays kind of more of the straight man role in the things he takes on. Whereas like Mustafa Shakar, we know him mainly from Luke Cage, and in that role, he's kind of like, he kind of has the wild card fit,
Yeah. He's kind of a wild card.
So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this is adjusted and interpreted. I mean, the ages are off too, because John Cho's like in his 40s now.
Right. I'm not
Spike Spiegel's supposed to be like in his 20s. So
I'm not too concerned about ages, to be honest.
It's anime ages too, so it's kind of
yeah, exactly.
They'll have the wise old man that's like a 16-year-old or something.
That's the 6,000-year-old dragon who looks like a 12-year-old.
Yeah, but it's just going to be kind of interesting to see how they interpret this story. Apparently, they're involved with the original series creator. Is going to be involved as a consultant on this.
A glaring omission in the casting, though, that I've heard that she has yet to be cast, is Ed.
Yes, they said she is going to be in it, though. They just haven't cast her yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Ed, and we haven't seen casting for Ein either. So
yeah, exactly. So we got some more casting news coming up, and I'm excited to actually see. I know the internet is quick to rush to judgment and say this is going to be crap, and it could be, but I'm going to keep an open mind and see how it goes first.
I'm just interested in how this is going to come together visually, because
that's
Netflix made Altered Carbon, which, some people like that show, some people don't. But even the people that don't acknowledge that the show is gorgeous. And the way it depicts like a sci-fi future as one of the best, we've seen on TV. It'll be interesting to see how they do Cowboy Bebop, because that has like a pretty vast array of settings that go from like kind of like a noirish kind of jazzy kind of style to like real just space metropolis kind of stuff.
It was kind of like every episode was different.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing in that. And also, like, another thing I'm wondering is how they're going to tackle the music. Music is a big part of this series.
They did mention, like, in some of the casting and stuff, like, they described the show as being like a jazz influence.
Right.
Which means that they're going to be sticking to that music, apparently.
Well, they should, yeah. It's like in the series, there's jazz, there's rock influences. There's a lot of, the episode titles are references to either famous jazz or famous rock songs,
Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how this is all put together and packaged.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see whether it turns out to be amazing, whether it turns out to be mortifying, and you would just rather forget it exists.
On just an aside before we move on, there's also supposedly some movement going on with the Akira project that's been in development for about as long as the Cowboy Bebop was when they were originally going to try that as a live-action movie. There had been that Akira project in development with Leonardo DiCaprio attached. I don't think he's involved at all anymore.
It's interesting to me. It's interesting, right? Because comic books, traditional Western superhero comic books, huge, right? And after that takeoff, they started trying to get Japanese anime and manga to take off in Hollywood, and they haven't really managed to get much of that stuff produced. It's all been in development hell for ages.
They've done a few. They did Ghost in the Shell, which was kind of critically panned.
I said they haven't managed to get much of that.
Yeah, but they've gotten some big ones, because they did Ghost in the Shell, that was critically panned, and just recently Battle Angel Alita, which James Cameron had been wanting to do for ages. He's been talking about wanting to do.
That was James Cameron's pet project forever, and then he got wrapped up with doing all these Avatar movies, and so eventually he decided instead of holding on to it for 50 years until he completes like all the Avatar movies, he decided to finally just give it to Robert Rodriguez and produce it instead of direct it.
Yeah, I haven't seen either of those. Ghost in the Shell looks absolutely stunning, but I've heard is just a complete mess. Right. And there's also all the whitewashing scandal going on with Scarlett Johansson in that one.
Which I don't even think is a big deal, to be honest.
And then Battle Angel Alita seemed to get like a bit better as far as praise goes and attention, but it didn't really do much at the box office. So it'll be interesting to see kind of like with more projects moving forward, like what pans out and what doesn't. What's interesting to me as an anime fan is that anime moves like really fast. Like the speed at like the way TV moves now is like the way anime's been moving for years. With like, you have TV shows like 50 plus new TV shows coming like every quarter. So every 4 months, or 3 months, I mean. There's just like a whole ton of new shows. Some of them continue on. Some of them get sequel seasons that could come years later. And some of them are just kind of like little one-off kind of stories that just kind of never pick up anything beyond that. And it just moves really, really fast. And all of these kind of big projects we're talking about, we're like, oh, huge things about anime are like from anime that are 10, 20, 30 years old. It's like, we're not talking about anime that just was produced, last year or something. We're talking about stuff that's quite old now. And it's not like Western comic books. Like the difference, there's a big difference there where like in Western comic books, Spider-Man's been going since it started. Like it never stopped.
It's still, these things stopped.
Yeah. Manga and anime, they're just kind of like one-off. They're just kind of, they're there and then they're done,
Right.
They don't keep reinterpreting them and redoing them. So because they don't do that, it moves so fast. And yet like all of the projects that are kind of in development are very old. I mean, Akira's from the 80s, the anime, the manga is even older, but the anime I think was like 1987.
Yeah.
Cowboy Bebop was like mid to late 90s, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing's been done with these things since. And that wasn't really that wasn't really the purpose of the intent for these things to be ongoing. It wasn't even like the intent for these things to have Hollywood movies at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. These are projects, the people that were involved in them are like, they've moved on ages ago.
Right.
It just doesn't have the same sentimentality to it that like typical Hollywood and TV industry stuff does, where like people want to re-explore it and re-look into that, and that kind of thing that we get in the West like that doesn't really happen that often in Japan. I mean, there are a few series like Astro Boy, which like every 15 years or so gets remade.
or Doraemon, which I believe is still an ongoing thing in Japan, because he's basically Japan's Mickey Mouse, from my understanding.
Kind of, yeah. But it's just kind of those are like big exceptions to the rule.
Right. And Gundam, there's probably always going to be a Gundam series.
Yeah. Gundam, they're all like completely different. They're all contained stories that are completely different from each other.
Yeah, they're all.
Except there is like a timeline where some of them connect, but that's like I don't think they've really touched on that, and the timeline.
Well, I mean, the hallmarks are the same. Like obviously the style and everything, the hallmarks. So you could tell a Gundam from a Transformer or any other robot,
Yeah. It's just going to be interesting to see kind of like how it moves forward with anime projects and where they kind of go. There's some like modern anime series that have been like really good and would make really interesting TV series.
I think they could do My Hero Academia, and they could easily get away with that.
I don't know. It might get buried in all the superhero stuff we have here,
Yeah.
And there are some similar things to that series that we have here already, with things like Umbrella Academy and X-Men and things like that. It's like we're already kind of like touching on a lot of that basis. And there's some other ones that are even closer, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, there have been some really good ones too. Like, there was a series called Erased that we did for an Advocates one year about this guy who he gets these like weird, like kind of almost like deja vu moments, but it's like where time kind of rewinds a little bit after like a certain incident will occur. And then he ends up like time rewinds all the way back to his childhood one time. Usually it's just like a few seconds, but one time it goes all the way back to his childhood, and you find out that he like where he grew up, there were these like child murders that occurred like in his hometown, like and he ends up trying to have to figure those out as like a kid or something. Like that could totally work as like a TV show,
right?
Like I could totally see that format working really, really well, especially with like the nostalgia plays that we do now, where people are so obsessed with nostalgia. Like you have this adult character and then you rewind back to his childhood and you start playing into nostalgia, and then you also have the obsession with like serial serial killers that we have like in America, and that kind of stuff would go hand in hand. It would work so well.
Yeah. I believe it works. I believe any idea can work if it's well executed and everything. I'm not necessarily a believer in like, oh, this can't work. I think, there was a point in time where superhero movies didn't work, because they just kept making them badly,
Yeah. And they used to have a term for certain books and stuff where they would call them the impossible, projects. Yeah. These are ones that you could never do as a TV show or a movie. And some of those, like many of those we're getting. We either already have gotten or we're getting them. Watchmen was one. Game of Thrones was another. Preacher was one, all of those have projects either already completed or coming, or ongoing.
Right, exactly. But I think you can, like the Impossible books. Well, they're impossible if you want to adapt it 1-to-1 in another medium, then yeah, of course. If you try to adapt, Watchmen, like Game of Thrones 1-to-1, like I don't know, that would be, way more than what we have now. It'd be like 50 years of content.
Yeah. But that's never what an adaptation is anyways. An adaptation is always, adapted, not just repurposed. But let's move on. Let's talk about, the magicians. So let's start off with, that the episodes are going to be mingled together a bit for us in the discussion. But to separate it, let's start off talking about the first episode, particularly Margot's journey, because this was a musical episode, but the only musical elements were in Margot's journey, which it does feel kind of separate from the rest. So we can kind of like isolate that in a bubble and talk about that and then move on to kind of the rest of the events that occurred in the 2 episodes. But starting off in Margot's journey, it starts off where it left off last week, or not last week, but 2 weeks ago, I should say, in which Margot ends up leaving. She lets herself be dethroned as the king of Fillory, because she learns about a weapon that can separate, a god or an entity from people. And this is a way that she can free and save Elliot. So she wants to go on this journey, so she convinces Fen to depose her and exile her from Fillory so that she can go on this journey. This had been a big setup before of like, oh, how's Fen gonna end up betraying Margot? And it ended up coming to nothing. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago already. But this episode continues on with Margot. She's kind of on this journey. She's running out of water. She's going through the desert, and in desperation for water, she sees a bead of what looks like water on this lizard, this like, this thing that's supposed to hold the secret to her destiny or something.
Right.
And so she licks this bead of water off this lizard in desperation, and she starts to hallucinate. And this is how we get the conceit of the musical episode, is she's hallucinating the music, and she's got this iPod that was given to her by Josh, loaded up with ballads from the 80s. And so this is what ends up playing into her musical delusions as she starts to see Elliot kind of just around as she's going on her journey, like singing to her.
We learn that Elliot is a part of her subconscious.
Yes. And other people end up kind of joining in along the way. She brings in, I believe, Quentin, and she brings in
other parts of her subconscious. These people are representing different parts of her subconscious. Like, Josh is there representing her guilt.
And Katie's brought in just because the actress is the best singer.
Yeah. Because I couldn't leave her out of a musical number, especially since this is different because, again, the musical parts are only in Margot's part of the episode. We touch on different stories in this episode, but they're not musical. Nobody sings in those other parts.
Yeah, we'll kind of talk about all of that, all the other elements later. We'll just kind of merge that all into the other episode discussion.
So, in a way, having these other characters manifest as part of Margot's visions, part of her psyche, is a way to get the actors in there to have them sing and participate in the musical numbers.
Yes, especially with Katie, because they really tried to like give a reason why for the other people why they'd show up there. Of course, Elliot's like essential to the story, so he's going to be there and everything. But then Katie, they just kind of throw in like, well, why is she here? Oh, it's because you need the range.
Yeah.
I love the Magicians. I love that they're trying to do this kind of musical episode thing since last season. I don't think this episode really landed that well, though.
No, I agree.
I mean, the story was somewhat interesting. It's basically, she ends up finding this kind of village out in the middle of nowhere in which
these like desert people.
Yeah.
And she finds out there are like sand demons.
Yeah, there's these like sand demons, and then if people get too emotional, they can possess somebody.
Well, the women. If the women get too emotional, they possess them.
They possess the men.
Yeah, okay, yeah, they possess the men.
Yeah, so they have this whole thing about like, oh, okay, so what's going on with that? What's causing this? And through her journey, she ends up finding out that she ends up having an encounter with one of these sand demons, and finds out.
Well, she's trying to pick up, I guess, the black specks of sand to make like the axes that expel the demons, because they have these axes that expel the demons.
It's like one speck of black sand per 100 parts sand or something.
Yeah, so she's like digging in the sand for these specks of black sand, and she's got to fill up this huge sack. She's got to make it full, you know, and it's such an impossible task. Eventually, at one point, she just breaks down, you know, and she gets real emotional, you know, she breaks down, and that summons one of the sand demons. But because she has her fairy eye, she can see it and she can communicate with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then she finds out their true purpose, what they're really doing.
Yes, it finds out that these sand demons are actually good. They're there to help women that are distressed.
Right.
And they do that by possessing the men and stopping them from doing whatever was distressing the women.
Right.
And they'll basically do as commanded by the women, and then they'll leave, you know, if they're treated properly, if that's the way that they're confronted, basically. So if the woman's freaking out because the man's forcing her to like into a bad position, it'll possess the man, and the woman can tell it to just go away.
Right.
And it'll leave.
And so what's been happening is the leader of the tribe, the male leader of the tribe, has been capturing and imprisoning these demons so that men can keep control over the women, you know, exert their control and power over the women of the tribe without worrying about these sand demons possessing them.
A tale as old as time. So yeah, basically, it's all like a ruse, basically, in order to keep control over the woman and stop the woman from having, you know, an exceptional amount of control over the men that these sand demons would basically grant if the correct information was presented.
Right, exactly. And so what happens is Margot comes back and her bag is full of the black sand, courtesy of the sand demon who filled her bag, you know, to help her from being distressed. And she comes back and she basically is like, yeah, well, you didn't count on me being a magician. And she basically uses her powers to free the sand demons who have been captured and destroy the patriarchy.
Yes. So it's funny because like the way they presented it is that she went, exposed their, you know, like talked to him, the leaders of this tribe, like privately, said that she knows what they're up to and what they're doing or something. And they're like, well, you know, now we can stop you or something. They're going to like charge at her. And she's like, did you forget I was a magician? Yeah. And she's just like throwing them around effortlessly with magic and freeing the sand demons.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a really cool scene. But then again, Margot is super cool. So you always root for Margot. Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much it for the musical episode, or the musical part of the episode. We'll talk about the rest of the events of that episode.
Margot gets her demon expelling axes that she's gonna use on the monster to expel him from Elliot.
Yes. That's kind of where the opening scene, I think, for this next episode, it was so good, was Margot explaining the story about her journey.
Yes.
I think it was to Quentin.
Because she has the axes. She's showing off the axes and she's explaining how she got them to Quentin and Julia. And then when she finishes the story, as she's finishing up the story, somebody keeps walking in and hears the end of it and then asks about it, wait, well, what? And then she repeats it. I forgot who it was the first time, but I know the third person that walks in is Penny. And eventually she's like, you can tell him I'm done.
She just kind of takes off from having to repeat the story. It was with the same ending line at the same time every time, her great journey. It was really funny, the way they do it. There's a few really funny parts in this episode, which is a big part of why I think that this episode was a lot better than the actual musical episode.
Right.
This one had a lot of information drops, basically.
Yeah, this one did.
Tying almost all the storylines directly together.
Well, which is good because we are I think we're 2 episodes out from the end now.
Yes, there's 13 in the season, so 2 episodes left, but it's cool because they tied together stories that we didn't think were going to connect.
Right.
And now they do. So it's kind of cool the way they were able to do that. But I mean, there's a few things kind of going on here. There's besides Margot recounting her journey, we have Quentin is now, I should say first that we did learn that Penny, what Penny saw or what Penny learned from, the real Elliot.
We finally learned that from the real Elliot is that the monster is not trying to form his body. It's his sister. Mm-hmm. And the girl that we saw on the stone being murdered was his sister. And what the gods did was they cut her into pieces and turned her pieces into stones, and each of the gods held on to one of those pieces.
And we learn from them in this next episode that we're discussing, we learn even more of that, which is even more about that, which, from the binder we learn. It turns out that the binder, by the way, this is how this is directly connected, was a librarian who was forced into a book.
We find out that the gods were actually librarians.
Yes, at least those gods, that group.
At least that group. I mean, not the Felurian gods or anything, but at least that group.
Yes, and they got their power by dividing up not Elliot's sister into those 4 pieces.
He explains it it's a little complicated, but he explains it if you kill a god, you can gain the power of a god, but killing gods causes the gods to turn magic off. So it doesn't
the god's parents to turn magic off.
It causes the god's parents to turn magic off. So it doesn't quite work out. So it's not as straightforward as that. So they devised a way. They created these creatures, these monsters, basically, with the power of multiple gods who could withstand being killed. And basically for the sole purpose of, as long as there was balance, as long as one was alive and the other, then it wouldn't matter. So basically they had these twins and they killed his sister because they could kill her and assume the power of the gods without the consequence that would normally bring, i.e. magic going away.
Yes. And so that's, not Elliot and his sister were so intrinsically linked. And his sister was kind of the more powerful and more intelligent entity of the two. Right. And not Elliot was kind of dependent on his sister, kind of almost helpless, except extremely powerful, without her. So they were able to kind of divide her up and turn themselves into gods. The binder being the one who figured out how to do this, they didn't want that information to still be out there. So these newly turned gods, forced him into a book and threw him away in the mirror world.
So these characters that we thought of as gods this whole time turned out to actually be librarians who had become gods.
Mm-hmm. So another story we have going on from that is that Quentin, now that he knows that Margot has a way to separate Elliot from not Elliot, they need a way to contain not Elliot.
Yes.
A way to bind him. And the only person that has a spell powerful enough to bind is Mayakovsky.
Yep, it's Mayakovsky. Unfortunately, Mayakovsky did some crazy magic where he transported his mind into the future, which involves if you transported your mind into your future version of yourself, but then the future version of yourself's mind goes into your past version of yourself. And unfortunately for Quentin, future Mayakovsky is basically senile.
Yes.
He's not in a good mental state. So they find an incapacitated Mayakovsky.
And they figure out that the only way that they're going to be able to communicate to him to get the spell that they need is to
basically
have Quentin travel back in time to when he first went to Breakbill South.
Right, basically do the same thing, except Quentin has to transfer his present mind to his past self at a point where Mayakovsky was not a bear, was alive and fully of sound mind.
Yes. The interesting thing here is that it's playing on Quentin and Alice's fractured relationship, because Breakbill South is when they first kind of consummated their relationship.
That was when they first kind of officially became a thing.
Yes, and now they're like very much not a thing.
Yeah.
With Quentin having quite a bit of resentment for Alice.
So unfortunately that complicates things.
On both ends, which is interesting, because the Quentin that goes back is like immediately grabbed by Alice, who's like trying to have sex with him, from that time. And then the Alice that's in the present time is having to deal with this younger version of Quentin who's completely enamored with Alice. So it's interesting the way they played it off, because like Quentin's like kind of, holding off against Alice and basically being like, hey, no, I can't do this right now. I have to finding excuses to kind of get away so he can talk to Mayakovsky. And that era's Alice is realizing something's up and not quite understanding it. On the other end, Quentin's, the younger Quentin is showing all of his affection towards the older Alice, and she's just having a really hard time holding off against it.
Right.
She ends up giving in, and predictably that's exactly when Quentin comes back, is when she's giving into it. And he's just kind of like pulls away from her again and is like, it's me. But yeah, it was interesting seeing Mayakovsky again. Interesting seeing his dynamic, the kind of dynamic he had with with Quentin when Quentin was at Breakbill South at this time. Like they're re-exploring that exact moment, and the way like he reacted towards him, and kind of like the way he was encouraging kind of the sexuality between the different, people that were there.
Right.
And like you should be having fun and making love and doing things, and playing into that, showing this future version of himself or of Quentin that's been through a lot of shit.
Eventually Quentin has to spill the beans to Mayakovsky about what's going on.
Yes. Mayakovsky, who has basically said I'm not going to remember any of this because I'm getting drunk.
Well, Mayakovsky basically figures it out before Quentin even tells him.
Mm-hmm.
And Mayakovsky's like, I'm not going to remember this anyway. So after Quentin comes clean, Mayakovsky gives up the spell.
Yes. And then, Quentin has to face that Alice from that time, who's been realizing that something's up with Quentin, who herself uses like a kind of a mental evisceration spell to kind of like kill off the last hour of her memories.
Right.
To protect it, but who's going through a moment where she's realizing that, something's up with her relationship with Quentin, which is hard for her because when they got together at Breakbill South, that was like, I think halfway or more than halfway through the first season. Yeah. That entire time Quentin had been pursuing her, and she'd been like holding off so hard. And then she finally broke and they ended up getting together in that moment. And so for the Alice of that moment, it's like, are you fucking kidding me? I just gave in. I just decided to make this work, to try it.
And now
And now I'm realizing it's doomed.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. What else do we have going on in this episode?
And it's been kind of sad this whole time. I keep waiting for, like, maybe they'll patch things up, but it doesn't happen. This episode, it didn't look like it really moved the needle in that direction either. It just kind of...
The Elliot Quinton shippers would be pissed if they patched things up.
Yeah, they would.
We should talk about Katie and Zelda and their adventure in the poison room.
Yes.
So they're looking for Zelda's boss, Everett's book, which is in the poison room, like all the librarians' books are. And we learn now that there's a way that librarians can use to survive the poison room, which is they have to swallow these bugs that end up eating the magical poison. And it excretes like a flavor into their mouth or something. So when Katie is walking around with Zelda, she's saying like, I'm tasting chocolate in my mouth. And Zelda's like, yeah, that's just a side effect of the bugs eating the poison. You don't have to worry until you start tasting mint. And so they're going through trying to find Everett's book because of all the information they got, both from Zelda's, just from the events that had been occurring and thinking that the library is involved in it, but also from Zelda's daughter, who had confided that she witnessed Everett being involved in all of this. And Zelda is still kind of reluctant to believe that because Everett's like her mentor. But they go into the poison room, Katie and Zelda, and they find his book, and Zelda speed reads it. He says it's a skill that the librarians have, and says it's all true. He has been stockpiling the magic. He is doing everything he said he's doing, but he's doing it so that he can turn himself into a god.
Yeah, he wants
and based on his book, he succeeds.
Yeah, based on the book, he succeeds. So he wants to be a god just like the olden time librarians, right? Yeah.
Which is making the whole library concept more and more skeevy.
It is. It seems like the library is really just privileged men trying to make themselves gods.
Yes, it's not the idea that there's some greater good to the library is just being eroded episode by episode this season.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so Katie and Zelda now they have this book and they're trying to leave and they realize they've been locked in. And that's when Katie reveals to Zelda that she's tasting mint.
So they don't have a lot of time to get out of there. And it kind of leaves there with that cliffhanger. So we're going to have to see how they get out of that one.
The idea, I think there's a pretty good chance that Katie ends up dying. And that's who meets Penny 40.
That's what I was saying, because the last person who went in there, Penny didn't make it out of there. You know, I mean, he got out of there, but he ended up dying.
Yeah, and he ended up greeting somebody in the underworld a couple episodes back.
Yeah, well, we saw him because they gave him a new assignment, and we didn't fully find out what that was.
We just know that somebody he knew died.
Right.
And we haven't seen who that is yet. And so Katie would make a lot of sense just because of their relationship.
Yeah, Katie would definitely make a lot of sense.
Though every time I try to predict the magicians, I end up wrong anyway. So.
Yeah, you're right. And finally, the last big thing was we see Julia and Penny starting to get closer. You know, we didn't even
Julia and Penny 23, we should say.
We didn't even mention this because the binder tells Julia that she has a choice, that he could restore her magic powers and make her fully a goddess, or she could return to being a human. Mm-hmm. And he said she has those two paths in front of her. Either path is going to be arduous. You know, it's going to be a trial no matter which path she chooses. But she has a choice on what she wants to be. And so she's talking to Penny 23 about the choice in front of her and trying to get his opinion. And through the conversation, they start to get closer. You know, they're really having this breakthrough moment in their relationship where it looks like they're going to start to be a thing. And then the monster, the Elliot monster, pops out and he reveals that he needs a body strong enough to contain his sister. And the last body he picked up, which is this woman he picked up from a bar, this dying woman he picked up from a bar earlier. we kind of got the, we didn't see what happened after he took her from the bar, but now we kind of get the hint that she's dead. Because he says like the last woman, wasn't strong enough, so he needs somebody stronger. And so he takes Julia.
Yeah, and just kind of zaps away, travels away.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because they were trying to set up Julia and Penny, and we see a long forgotten character since around the time that Penny 40 first died, basically. And when he was a ghost floating around there.
Right.
He encountered this like pervert peeping Tom ghost named Hyman. And so he encounters him again. Hyman was setting up a room to try to get Julia and Penny to hook up, and Margot wandered in there, and he knocked her out and stuffed her in a closet and waited for them to come. Wow. And it was putting flower petals on the bed and doing all stuff to try to get them to hook up. And knowing that with Margot being able to see him because of her fairy eye, they end up having Penny use his ability to kind of conjure up or have an out of body experience where he can communicate to Hyman.
Yeah.
And he communicates and finds out that Hyman is just kind of he just wants the two of them to be happy. And
he just wants Julia.
And he just wants to watch it.
yeah, he just wants Julia and Penny 23 to get together. And that is his ulterior motive. I mean, he says even from his first, he treats it like a show, he's watching a show.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about everybody as characters in a program,
Yeah. Very dehumanizing way. It's pretty funny though.
Yeah.
Last we're brought into another news story, which is, Josh and Fen over in Fillory end up, finding out that there's been a naiad who's been captured and put in the prisons there. And going down there and having a conversation with them, the naiad is, directly connected to the water in Fillory. And she's upset about, the water being contained. And she keeps talking about the 13th, the 13th king of Fillory who did something. And they end up realizing it's not water so much he's talking about, but magic. And that, the 13th king of Fillory, did something to contain, a reservoir of magic to stop it from moving throughout Fillory and just to gather in one space.
Sure.
And, this is now also supposedly going to be tying into this storyline that we already have with, all these librarians trying to turn themselves into gods. So we got that, a new storyline kicking off there, which, who knows, maybe that'll be the setup for the next season instead.
Yeah, maybe.
But it seems like hoarding magic is kind of the first step towards, corrupt magicians trying to turn themselves into gods here.
Yeah. It does. I think the setup for next season is going to be Everett trying to become a god in the library. It seems to me.
Or he becomes a god or something and
yeah.
Because according to his book, he succeeds.
Yes. Remember that the one defining thing of a Magician season finale is them managing to contain the current crisis, but inadvertently creating another one.
Yes.
And the current crisis right now is the monster inhabiting Elliot and his sister. So they're gonna defeat them, get Elliot back, and that's gonna, and what they do is gonna lead to some other crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also wanted to bring up one last thing, which is I think the funniest part of the episode, which was, Dean Fogg getting a phone call on a banana.
Yeah. Banana phone.
It was so funny because it was set up that Katie was trying to contact them.
Yeah.
And she was using a spell to reach out, and he's sitting there and he hears the phone ringing, he grabs for the phone, and he answers it and there's nobody there, and then it keeps ringing, and he looks over on his desk and there's a banana, and it's shaking on the table.
I love it because it's 2019 and there's a banana phone reference.
Yeah.
Talk about an old school meme.
But yeah, so that's pretty much it for the Magicians. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up, or?
I think that covers everything, unless you can remember something else, because I can't.
No, yeah, that's pretty much it. So next week we're going to be talking about the 12th episode. It's just the penultimate of the season. The week after that, though, Game of Thrones is coming back. So we're going to be talking about both Game of Thrones and the Magicians that week. The Magicians season finale, the Game of Thrones season premiere.
Oh, I can't wait. Oh, that's going to be epic.
Yes. So yeah, all that we have left is kind of talk about what's coming up in the week ahead. So I made this one a little bit longer just to include next Sunday in our listing. So, because it's important, because it's a big one to talk about. But Friday, April 5th, 2019, that's yesterday. We record this on Saturday. Yes, it's Really Us Singing, the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend concert special aired on the CW, as well as the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend season finale. So that's it. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend's over.
Show's over. It's done, folks.
Also, Our Planet, the miniseries, came to Netflix. We talked about this last week. It's basically the same people who did Planet Earth. So, you want to test out your new TV, your new 4K HDR TV? Here you go. Also coming back on Netflix is Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which its second season just hit.
Yeah, it's already
very short space between its first and second season.
Yeah, it's funny too because if you look, because I watched the first episode yesterday, and it's titled Chapter 12, and then the episode title, but it's like, so when you turn on Netflix, it says Season 2, Episode 1, Chapter 12.
You're confusing me, Netflix.
Yeah, exactly.
God, there's another thing that did that. I think it might have been, what was it? I think it was Legion.
Yeah,
Legion titled all the episodes chapter, whatever. And it was a continuation of so you'd be like Season 2, Episode 3, Chapter 11,
Yeah.
Also coming to Netflix is Quicksand and Tijuana. Warrior came to Cinemax. This is a series based on some notebooks that Bruce Lee had written, some ideas he had for something, and they're kind of
actually sounds
adapting that.
I'm kind of disappointed I don't have Cinemax for that, because that does sound really cool. It's interesting too because this is adapted from stuff Bruce Lee wrote, because back in the 70s, Bruce Lee was writing this. He wanted to get this made as a series in the 70s. This isn't exactly the same series that he envisioned. They were talking to Bruce Lee's daughter, and she was like, obviously, we've had to modernize it, to make it relevant for modern audiences. But it's basically the TV show Bruce Lee was shopping around. And what happened is the networks rejected it. The network rejected it. And then that's the same network that rejected it basically turned around and made Kung Fu, which has basically the same premise of a martial artist in the Old West.
Yeah, and except they made him white.
Except they made him white. So I think they just didn't want to make Bruce Lee's show, which would be a show about an Asian man. They wanted a show about a white man, but they gave him an Asian background and made him Kung Fu, a total BS.
There's a lot of stuff about Bruce Lee right now that's going to be happening in TV and movies and stuff, because Bruce Lee's also a character in the new Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is about the Charlie Manson murders.
Yes, I saw, and the little bit they showed in the trailer looked great. It looked like a great portrayal of Bruce Lee.
Yes. So it'd be really interesting to see all the stuff with Bruce Lee touched in it coming to TV and movies right now.
Right.
And then also on Friday, The Tick season 2 hit Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I still have yet to watch that, so I gotta get on that too. It
just came out yesterday. You got time.
I know. I just started watching Sabrina again, so April is packed. I don't know how I'm going to get through all this material.
Then on Sunday, April 7th, 2019, Killing Eve returns to BBC America. It's also going to be airing on AMC. I'm not sure if that's just the first episode or if they're going to be airing. I think they might be doing the whole season on 2 networks. AMC, of course, BBC America and AMC are owned by the same parent company. And, it could just kind of make sense for them to kind of, if they have like a big show for one of the channels and not the other, why not just put it on both of them?
Right, exactly.
And Killing Eve was like a huge hit last year. So they're kind of banking really heavily on it being like a big deal, moving forward, even more so. Also, A Discovery of Witches, same thing, AMC, BBC America. I think that might only be for the first episode though.
Oh,
it's airing on both. Then The Shy comes back to, Showtime, and Unforgotten comes to PBS. Then on Tuesday, April 9th, 2019, The Code returns to CBS. The Bold Type on Freeform. Foss Verdon, which has been heavily advertised recently, comes to FX. Yumi Her comes back to AT&T. On Thursday, April 11th, 2019, Black Summer comes to Netflix. This is supposedly like a prequel to Z Nation on Sci-Fi, but it's like a new show on Netflix.
Huh.
So it's kind of like about the zombie outbreak or something.
Because Z Nation recently ended, or they announced it was ending.
Yeah. So this is kind of like this like prequel series. I think it's got like a bit of more serious tone, which I don't know why they're going to do that. Like they started trying to push for a more serious tone on Z Nation, and I think it's what kind of made me lose interest in it, because the whole point was that it was a lower budget thing, and it was fun that it was a show that was trying to be fun.
Goofy. This was a show that had a zombie George R.R. Martin,
Yeah, it was like a funny zombie show.
Yeah, we have a serious zombie series. It's called The Walking Dead. Why would you, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have to see what they end up doing with Black Summer. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but it looks like they're taking a more serious tone with it.
Okay. I don't know how that's going to work out, because, you have The Walking Dead and you have the spin-off of The Walking Dead. And
The Walking Dead itself isn't even holding up that hotly right now. So.
Yeah, so you got your fill of dramatic zombie TV, So yeah, the thing that made Z Nation stand apart was it was goofy. It was like, because it was like the Asylum doing.
Yes.
The Asylum isn't known for their dramatic, serious films.
So it'll be, we'll have to see what they end up doing with that.
Right.
I might just have a misread on it, but who knows. Friday, April 12th, 2019, Diablo Guardian comes to Amazon Prime, Huge in France to Netflix, and Special to Netflix. And then I also wanted to note something coming on Sunday, April 14th, just because I don't want to talk about it just, the week before, because we probably won't even have the podcast up in time to mention it. And that is the Les Miserables miniseries to PBS.
Oh, okay.
And also a little lesser known show called Game of Thrones coming back to
I was like, what? I don't care about Les Miserables. Sorry.
No, Game of Thrones is back on April 14th.
I was like, I'm not watching that.
So excited for Game of Thrones, but yes. Man, I'm stressed out too. We do a party every year, and I've been trying to get everything ready.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I know you want to probably do a lot of things. I'm gonna be way too busy. Like, I'm obviously gonna watch the shows like every week, and do the podcast obviously, but extracurriculars probably. We should try and do something special for the finale though. I feel like.
Maybe we can get like some guests on to talk onto the podcast or something and do like a big thing for that. I think what I'm gonna end up doing for Game of Thrones, besides the podcast, I think on Mondays I'm gonna record, like, I think we did this last year, where I'm gonna do maybe like a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Like a video that's only a couple minutes long, and I'll just do it, and it'll talk about like a scene from the night before's episode.
I'm expecting 20 people to just die in the premiere. Like, right off the bat, just dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. Like they're just gonna come in with that. I just know it.
I don't know, like people, cause some people have seen it now. They did like a red carpet event for the premiere. So now some people have seen that episode, and a lot of them are saying it's one of the best season openers to Game of Thrones. A lot of people said it was actually really funny.
Really?
I don't think they're going to be going for the killy stuff in the first episode.
So you don't think they're going to go, they're not going to just start off brutal?
No. I think they're going to focus on the characters at first, and then they're going to start getting into the crazy stuff around episode 2 and 3. The director that did like the Battle of the Bastards and stuff is doing episode 3.
Right.
So I think that's going to be a big battle episode.
That's going to be a big battle episode because there aren't like, it's not a full season of episodes either. There's like,
no, there's only 6.
Yeah, there's 6 episodes. So like episode 3 is like halfway through the season.
Yeah. And I think they're going to do a big episode there. That's going to be episode 3. And the first episode I think is going to be a lot lighter and it's just going to be more about setup. And then the second episode is going to kind of transition between the two. Like that's going to be them kind of getting ready for a big battle. And then episode 3 is going to be like a huge
I can't wait.
Episode.
I can't wait. Damn,
So,
it's gonna be like so bittersweet when it's over.
Yeah, it's gonna be nice to watch a show come to a good close, but at the same time, it's gonna be depressing.
Yeah,
but hey, we got a spin-off series coming too. So
yeah, cool. yeah, exactly. We got a spin-off series, so I'm looking forward to that. So
yeah, and I also think either around the premiere or around the finale, we're probably gonna start getting like big trailers for like Watchmen and stuff too.
Yeah, definitely.
So like there's some other big stuff coming.
HBO is gonna really be pushing this. Okay, don't unsubscribe from HBO yet. We got other things. We promise. Please keep your subscription.
Yeah. So that's gonna be the most exciting night of television this year, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, that's it. So as we said, next week we're going to talk about The Magicians some more, and the week after that's going to be Magicians and Game of Thrones double episode for that. Until then, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. All of those links can be found on our main site, thetotalscreen.com. Also, drop us a line. Say what you think of our new intro music for the podcast. If you don't like it, you've only got 50 episodes to deal with it. We change the podcast theme every 50 episodes, so we got this one done just in time for this episode, and we'll work on another one for episode 251. But for now, this is episode 201 coming to a close. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best